Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining today's conversation, bringing the humanities to the arts, I will say. My name is Alexandra Sinetus. I am the Director of Program, and I'll be serving as your moderator today. For today's conversation, we have wonderful guests, and I'm super excited to have that particular conversation today. So, what we have today is we're going to be talking about the rich relationships between the humanities and the arts. And we will try to explore how literature, history, and philosophy shape and inform artistic expression across a wide range of mediums, and how the arts, in turn, influence culture, identity, and social change. So, together, we will reflect on the role of creativity in enhancing our understanding of the human experience. And we have with us today three panelists. The first panelist is Daniella Greeman. She's the Director of Community Engagement and Events at Creative Baltimore. So, with over 10 years of experience in creating and managing social impact in projects, she is a passionate and driven professional who strives to bridge the nonprofit and corporate ecosystem to propel meaningful change. And then we also have with us Monica Jeffries Hazangeles. I'm hoping I'm saying it right. Uh,
Hazangeles.
Hazangeles, who is the president and CEO. Monica is leads the institution with of Strathmore, president and CEO of Strathmore. She leads the institution with a strategy rooted in service to the community and with a commitment to the inspirational programming and dynamic creative potential that it brings to life. Known for extensive development of innovative partnerships, she brings a borderless approach to ensuring access to the arts for everyone. And then we have with us Victoria Scott McConnell, who is a passionate about fiber. Her quilts have evolved over 40 years of quilting, starting from traditional quilting, which she still enjoy occasionally. Now, more of her time is spent with more modern design using her own dyed material. She grew up surrounded by arts as both parents were professional artists. Thank you for joining us, Victoria.
Thank you.
And I think to get started today, I think one of the things I'm going to do is basically ask us of the opening question. Um, when you think about the arts and the humanities together, what comes to mind? Are they the same thing or do they serve different but complementary purposes?
I'll start.
I was like, which one of us do you want to start, Alex?
I think of them together, Alexandra. I think they're kind of like facets, maybe of a prism. Each of them offers a different perspective or interpretation of life, and our own personal history, our identity. I think they all work together.
Thank you
Yeah,
so
I would
much,
agree with
Becca.
Monica. I think that I do like the way that you frame that as like complementing each other. I think they do serve different purposes, but complement each other.
Mm.
I think in the way that we work at Create Baltimore, the humanities almost serves as like the how and the why and providing structure. And then the arts comes into the kind of what, when, and where of things, and kind of getting folks to and giving access to the things. But the humanities gives us kind of structure of what that would look like. So yeah, I definitely think they complement each other.
It's also very fluid as time
Yes.
changes and events change, so does that. And I think the arts can give us a history of what has happened through time. If you look at the the art through time, 18th century art, 18th century fibers, 18th century furniture, 18th century music. You can see that it's developed certainly with your music background, Monica. You have seen music change dramatically over time, and certainly that is an art. And if you consider that in the humanities,
Mhm.
it is constantly changing.
Mhm.
Thank you so much. And if you now joining us, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it. And if you please share your name, where you're coming from, so everybody can actually know where everybody is coming from. So we're super excited to have you here. And one other question I have, because I think you mentioned it, Daniela, in terms of framework and structure. I think the humanities, like thinking about history, philosophy, or literature, kind of like give us that particular framework for understanding human experience.
Right.
So how does your work in the arts draw on those frameworks, whether consciously or not? And I think we can go with Monica, Victoria, and then you, Daniela.
Okay. Um, Gosh, I think those three frameworks really provide the context a lot of times for art and music, theater and dance. In our work here at Strathmore specifically, we have a program called the Windows series, and it is an intentional exploration of the history and context and influences going on at the same time a particular work of art was created or a particular series of pieces. Some of those, I have a couple of titles. Some of those titles are Women Artists on the Intersection of Music, Politics, and Identity, The Path of the Artist in Times of Conflict. These kinds of programs really serve to deepen the experience of the patron. It really helps to place a piece of art or music in a context or time period. And it just helps us understand better what was going on, the motivations of the artist, and how that art influenced even people at the time it was created and now many years later, perhaps. It provides a real juxtaposition, I think, for that conversation.
And I'm looking at what comes to mind is the history portrayed in quilts. For so much of history, women are relegated to a secondary role in history and politics. However, through their art forms of in quilts, they were allowed, or it was they showed their feelings and their political aspirations and their political feelings through their quilts. And if you look carefully, and there have been the Maryland Historical Society has portrayed a lot of historical quilts which show protests,
Mm.
and they're in there, they're hidden, and they're showing they didn't like this, what was going on. And then it's coming out now in QuiltCon, which is a current quilt, current modern quilt exhibition, and people are protesting one way or another, both ways, to show what they like and what they don't like about what's going on. And it's coming out in the art. So, and taking that further than quilts, you have graffiti on the walls in the city. And people are taking that. And what I like about that, instead of just graffiti as being a protest, a lot of people are taking that and saying, okay, paint my walls.
Mm.
Let's celebrate it. Banksy is
Mhm.
saying, okay, let's do this and make it a celebration of a protest or a feeling, or and make it art. And then you have the I know it's done in other states, but I know specifically it's done in Maine, where if they have a government project, 1% has to go to the 1% of the monies invested in a government project goes to art in the project, whether it's a sculpture garden that goes with it. And that, I think, is where we're investing in art. And I think they do a really good job.
I agree with Monica and Victoria. I think Victoria, that 1% for public art is something that we do here in Baltimore City as well, through Create Baltimore and working with the city. I think the way that humanities or arts gets to kind of come into those frameworks is keeping the humanities culturally relevant in a way. I think sometimes folks see the humanities as these like the origin of the foundations of expression that we have now, but the arts keeps it relevant. And Artscape, which we just just got through a couple weekends ago,
Right, right.
is a great example. This year is the first year we've used as many actual institutions and indoor spaces during Artscape. It is an outdoor festival, but again, we're working with different climate and different elements and various abilities. And we want to make sure that everyone coming to the festival feels like they can experience arts and culture in whatever way that they feel comfortable. And so in activating Baltimore Center Stage and activating the Reginald F. Lewis of African American History and activating Zion Church, we were able to use these institutions that do a lot of cultural storytelling through the arts. And so to have various activities going on in there, whether panel conversations or an actors competition or things like that that we were doing during the festival, it allowed folks to experience the venue, those venues who have been there for some hundreds of years that they had never gone into before, and being able to experience something that felt, as Victoria said, a little modern. For example, Zion Church had a wall there that they were like, hey, could this be public art? Like, we would like some graffiti on here. And I think people maybe not think of them as folks that would want graffiti on their wall, but that's how we're thinking. We should be thinking of graffiti as a form of art, as a form of protest, as a form of expression. And so a church and an institution that has been around for as long as they have, being able to accept and welcome that and kind of welcome in a different arts community to do something like that, was exciting for us. So we're going to be working with them to figure out what that looks like in a couple months, right? But I think the festival and the work that we do helps us to keep what feels like arts and culture now relevant to the foundations that we were able to establish through the humanities.
Thank you so much, Daniela. I feel like since we are talking about funding structure, I feel like that's the best way for us to think about, talk about funding since we are there. Because I think oftentimes the arts and humanities are treated as separate categories because you have humanities, for instance, you have the National Endowment for the Arts. You also have the National Endowment for Humanities. But artists have always been doing humanities work. So how do you see the arts functioning as a humanities practice? And what are the real consequences for communities, for funding, and for creative freedom of keeping them apart? So I will have Victoria, Monica, and then you, Daniela.
Um, Funding is just huge. It's everything. As far as we have a small uh, fiber arts center, and most of our funding comes from the Caroline County Arts Council. But their funding, they want us mostly to do Caroline County, and Caroline County has 33,000 residents, and they want us to service the 33,000 residents. However, we are the Fiber Arts Center of the Eastern Shore, which includes Delaware. So their funding is to go to Caroline County, and we are servicing the Eastern Shore. So the geography is limiting us. So the funding is a problem there. And then, of course, the funding for arts has been cut back so dramatically. We applied for and got 2 years ago, we got a grant from the Maryland Humanities. And of course, as you know, that was cut back dramatically. And the people that got the grants were cut back dramatically, and the amounts were cut back, and we applied but didn't get that. And so we're struggling to survive, and looking for funding and applying for grants is very tedious, and finding someone who can navigate and do the grant speak is difficult, and finding out exactly what to say and how to say and who can say it the right way that it'll pass through the hoops that can make it to the funding is very difficult. So staying alive for small nonprofits who are basically servicing art. We have one employee, and the rest of it is volunteer. Mowing the lawn. I mow the lawn. Um, um, and we clean the bathrooms and we do everything to keep this place open. And we're happy doing it and we really feel good about what we're doing it. And I know both of your organizations, Danielle and Monica, are huge compared to us. But I'm sure just scaled to a a larger extent, you have the same type of issues. And we're thinking, okay, how do we make this work? How
Right.
do, and it's the same. I mean, the nuts and bolts are the same. They're just, you have just much bigger bolts, much bigger nuts going on.
Oh, Victoria, that's so funny. I was just welcoming our new group of interns this morning, and I actually told a story about me mowing the lawn at the mansion because that's what we do in
Yeah,
nonprofits.
yeah,
When you've got a bride coming for a wedding rental, whether or not it got done some other way, it's got to get accomplished. So we all
right,
pitch in.
right.
I actually think that arts and humanities are symbiotic. They rely on each other, and I prefer to embrace a really broad definition of them. I think, and the more that we can broaden their appeal, I think the more likely they are to survive. I mean, we talk about entanglement a lot here. How can we make ourselves relevant and
Mhm.
entangled in the life of our community? And I think the more that we connect them together, the better off we are for funding,
Mhm.
for attendance, for understanding. Um, I mean, each of those arts disciplines really relies on the humanities framework beneath it. And each speaks a little differently to the human experience
Mhm.
and illustrates history and connection and culture in different ways. But if we embrace them as facets of the same um, rubric, I think that then we're not going to risk marginalization in the same way, and we have a bigger voice with which to advocate for them.
Yeah, I agree with you, and that's why we have embraced the historic building next to us to create an African American museum
Mm.
along with a fiber arts center, so we
Mhm.
can create and build a meeting space for the community that the teenagers can meet there, and we can have studios above, so it's not solely for a fiber arts center, but we can bring more people in. So I absolutely agree with you.
Mhm.
I think for us, the funny thing is, Victoria, I think folks think we are bigger than we are, and Alexandra knows this. Even though we serve as a quasi city agency, we are a nonprofit. So we are a 501(c)(3). And in that, and managing that in that portfolio comes with being a grant administrator. It comes with being a program manager and also being a facilities manager because we do manage a number of facilities in the city. So just like you all, our facilities team, they're cleaning the bathrooms, they are mowing the lawns, they are shoveling the snow, they are also then doing it in time to make sure they could tour a bride around the Cloisters Castle in Simonium for a potential wedding. And so I think the way that they should be working together, especially in terms of funding, I think how we've been able to try to shift our thinking in that and keeping it integrated and keeping it collaborative is through programming. I think I have a unique perspective, having been with Create Baltimore a number of years, working in development and partnerships, and now in community engagement and events. I see how our social impact or the social impact programs or the work that we're doing with then sponsors or with partners in Baltimore, and keeping it local as much as we can kind of feeds back into the microeconomy for our artists here and for our creatives here. And so really just making sure that like we're aligned in terms of the arts and culture ecosystem in the city so that we feel like we're feeding each other constantly. I think that helps us to kind of put the pieces together, which I feel we're doing better. But as we continue, I think to grow and look at Baltimore as a city that has so many nonprofits and is known for that, it's also like pooling our resources, especially with programming that's allowing us, or events that allows a large number of folks to get together to be in a space where they can experience things together. And as Monica said, you have these different human experiences, but they're also speaking to a collaboration with the humanities. So what does that look like for literature or for language or for religion when we can do it in a space that might be maybe seem untraditional, or we can kind of highlight and elevate, different languages and folks of different communities that are represented here in Baltimore. And it's really using the resources that we already have here and doing better at really asset mapping the arts in a way that everyone's getting a piece of the pie.
Thank you so much. I feel like all three of you pretty much tease out a little bit, because I feel like you mentioned about like the social impact, a little bit of the collaboration. And I know, Victoria, you talk about the geographic limitation in terms of the funding. And you mentioned also, Monica, about the entangling sometimes and relying on the humanities framework. So I guess my question is, if you could change one thing about how the arts and humanities are taught, funded, or practiced together, what will it be? Because I think that's something you can expand on, and I would definitely be curious to learn more about your thoughts on this. So if you could change one thing about how the arts and humanities are taught, funded, or practiced together, what would it be? So we'll have Daniela, Monica, and then Victoria.
Oh shucks, of course the one that would stump me, I start first. Ooh. I think I would change how we compete a little in terms of the funding. And it's not an intentional way, but to what I was just saying, and to what Victoria was saying in terms of grant fund and grants and writing grants. We do have the privilege of having an institutional giving director here, because grants run a lot of what we need to be able to do to provide for artists, not for us as the organization, but of course, that's helpful as a C3, but to be able to make sure that we're pushing out resources for the creative community here, it's the competition of it, and it's like healthy competition is its own thing. But I think we're all essentially, as nonprofits, almost coming after the same grants a lot of the times, and there's such a limited pool, and that pool keeps shrinking, as Victoria said. And so I would love something that allowed us to feel like we were doing it off of in more of a collaborative way, and not really feeling like it was this kind of like crabs in a barrel. Whoever can get the most money this year can push out the best programming. And like there are ways for us to work a little, I think, better and succinctly together. I just don't know what that one thing is, and what takes away that, because I think the nature of nonprofits and the nature of trying to make sure that your organization is staying afloat is to, kind of scratch and claw for what the resources are and where the access is. And so really trying to, again, it's the pool of resources. How can we be working together for this when we know that the funds are limited? And I don't feel like we have really hit that yet. And I would love to know what that would be, but that would be the one thing I would change.
I think for me, I would like to change the educational frame around arts and humanities, that
Absolutely.
when we advocate for arts and humanities, what we're really doing is advocating for creativity and
Yes.
development of our capacity for innovation and problem solving and resiliency. They're all connected in my mind. And it speaks to that notion again of broadening what the arts and humanities mean to us. I mean, creativity is kind of it's a life force. It's with us from the time that we're children. And without it, civilization doesn't move forward. And I think if we approached the study of, the funding of, the advocacy for arts and humanities as a facilitator of creativity and developing a really creative workforce, citizenry, if you will, there might be more of a groundswell or understanding of how essential they really are.
I agree, Monica.
Mhm.
Uh,
Thank
yes, I agree with both of what you've said. I'm coming from 40 years of education and national board certification. I'm spent a lot of my time with STEM
you.
activities, science, technology, and engineering and math. And
Mhm.
there was a slight push to make it STEAM with the
Yes.
arts
Yes.
in there. But I don't think they could figure, the powers that be couldn't figure out how to test it.
Hmm.
Um,
Mm.
and and so it kind of went by the wayside because you can't test creativity easily. It's not a B, C, or D answer, thank goodness.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, um, but so it's interesting that my doctorate is in leadership and innovation. So
Mm.
they did with the doctorate, they said innovation, which is creativity, because they would throw us all kinds of problems, like say come up with an innovative solution for this.
Right.
So they did with, and of course they were long, long, long papers where you had to throw everything to the wind and say, okay, how would you solve this problem?
Hmm.
Which is too it's too hard to do with, 150,000 children.
Right.
However, we that is what we need to do. We need more teachers per students to do that. But that's what they need to do, and that's what I
Hmm.
tried to do in my classroom, on the side. Nobody was watching. Um, um, maybe we could change the tax structure, or the 1% that they have in Baltimore. Could we have everyone that makes over a certain amount say you must add something to some art of your choice?
Hmm. Hmm.
You must do this. Can we do that? I don't know that that would fly in this atmosphere, but um, we have to invest in it.
Yeah.
There are people who have lots of money and some who do
Yeah.
invest in it, but we just need to get to them because, Danielle, you're right. There is an ever diminishing pot, and we're all fighting each other for the same thing.
Yeah.
And at some point, you kind of go, what is the point of spending hours and hours and hours and hours
Hmm.
writing this grant when
Hmm.
there is such a small chance of you getting it?
Right.
Um,
Right.
yeah, it's better to just go out there and mow the lawn yourself, you know?
Listen, yeah, by the time I've mowed the lawn, you've given the grant away a few times, right?
Right,
So I might
right.
as well go do it. But,
Yes.
to both of your points, I think the way that I think we've been operating is not to prioritize or see the arts in a way that can feed the economy or can provide for the workforce or can contribute in these ways. And so the financial investment from larger powers doesn't feel like it's really trickling down in a way for us to do that in an equitable manner. And so the reason I was so passionate coming into Create Baltimore about corporate sponsorships and partnerships where I started is because we all went through a lot of things during COVID, and there were a lot of larger companies and corporations that were making very big promises to communities that were historically just like not were oppressed, who were excluded. And so my job, in a way, I felt a little bit of joy in it, was like, well, let me go find the money that they say that they have.
Yes.
Let's knock on the doors. And if you're saying that I'm holding your feet to the fire, you're saying that you want to support these communities, you cannot support them in just the way that you think is the best way to support. Arts is the way that many people in Baltimore, thousands of creatives, feed themselves and sustain their families every single day.
Right.
So how are you putting that money into the arts? And so if I'm knocking on it, healthcare or financial institutions or whatever it looks like, to say, hey, this is the impact of your investment, and here's where it goes. As a nonprofit, the storytelling behind that for the creators is the biggest thing, but they can't get that story out if there's no investment. So it's prioritizing what it looks like to the workforce, so that people feel like this is something that needs to be prioritized from education, from the start, from K through 5. This shouldn't be something that we're kind of discovering as maybe it could be an avenue as an entrepreneur when I'm an adult, because then it feels too late for folks, So
Right. And I think there we are a larger community than a lot of people know. And
yes.
I think we are spinning our little wheels separately.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things that the Fiber Arts Center has done, and we've done one, we're going to do another one in November, is the gathering of the guilds. And what we're doing is we're gathering as many fiber art guilds as we can find. And we're inviting them all to come together and network and just find each other and tell each
Yeah.
other what we do. What outreach do you do? What do
Mm-hmm.
you do? What classes do you do? Who do you come in to have speak? Can we support each other? Where do you get your money?
Yeah.
How? And we had 14 guilds come together on the first one, and
Wow.
to Denton, the population of 2,000.
Mm-hmm.
So to Denton, and we're going to expand, and we're going to have vendors next time. So we didn't have vendors; we just had guilds come and talk to each other. But I think the arts community, whether it be whatever art, has to create, it's like we're all spinning our separate wheels. We need to
Mm-hmm.
come together as a big entity and say, hey, you need to support us because we are doing good things for humanity,
Right.
for all people.
Right.
And people are welcome. Anyone
Mm-hmm.
welcome. Come
Right.
in. This will be good for you. It'll lower your blood pressure. It'll make you, you know, it'll support your grandmother. Your kids will
Yes.
be happy. It'll
The
make you
benefits are
healthier.
endless.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I feel like one of the things I really like that Monica mentioned was kind of like using the framework of advocating for the arts and humanities as a facilitator of creativity. I feel like you got something, Monica. So I feel like that's one of the ways I would say to think about this. So I guess the question
Mhm.
I have is, since both you, Daniela and Victoria, sort of centered around like the local communities. So we talk a lot about the value of the arts in the communities. You've recently mentioned how people were able to come together. The
Mhm.
first gathering that you were able to have, you were able to host, Victoria. When you think about the communities your work reaches, what do you hope they take away? And not just from the art itself, but from the experience of encountering it. We will start with you first, Victoria, then Daniela, and then Monica.
We were hoping they would network and they would find each other and they would expand their experiences, and expand what they knew they could do. Um, if you're a quilter, maybe you could say, "Oh, that knitting looks great. Maybe I'll do that. Maybe I'll." And next year we're having people with alpacas come in, and there's a paddock, so people with alpaca and sheep are going to come in, so they're going to be shearing sheep and shearing alpacas, so they're going to be
Mhm.
there are weavers there, so they're going to be knitters and crocheters and weavers and quilters and embroiderers, and then we're going to hopefully expand and keep going. And then we're going to invite children in and what they can do, and so we get bigger. And I don't know. It's just let people know that it's something that they can do, and it's can be profitable,
Mhm.
and it's a business
Yeah.
and a recreation.
Yeah.
So I've forgotten what the question was. Um,
What you want the communities to take from it, I
oh,
think. Yeah.
so I
Which you've
want that.
said. Yeah.
Okay, okay. I
You
want
were
them
right
to
on it.
expand.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Mhm.
Um, but So I want them to do that and then go on from there. And
Yeah.
maybe other people, like a music guild, could take that from that idea and go on and create that.
Mhm.
Because all of the arts could do that,
Yeah.
I believe.
Mm.
Thank
I
you.
think for us at Create Baltimore and Alexandra, you know this well, and Tim, who's online, good to see you, knows this well from serving on our the Create Baltimore Community Advisory Committee, which is new. It's a new concept for our organization. Um, Part of the reason that that was birthed was out of response to listening sessions that we held in the community to find out where the gaps were. What did people want to see from an organization like Create Baltimore? At that time, we were formerly known as Baltimore Office of Promotion and the Arts. What do you need to see from the Arts Council of your city to serve you? Where are the gaps that you feel in your artistry, in your practice, in advocacy, in education, or just in community programming that we could be helping to at least facilitate or provide resources for in a different way? And with the community advisory committee, there are pillars that we have, particularly one is around art is public health. And so the way that I personally think of that is how the arts is directly addressing social determinants of health. And so we look at that from there are artists that need housing, there are artists that are trying to make an income off of their art and their creativity and their innovation. They are artists who, need stable employment or whatever that looks like. And in food, there you need to feed yourself to be able to do your practice all day, right? Some of the basic needs that need to be addressed so that you feel like you can balance having a lifestyle, a personal life, and also sustain a practice. And so for me, from the kind of community engagement and event side, it's making sure that these programs and events that we're creating are creating a space where people feel like they have social cohesion, especially post COVID. And we could say that COVID was however many years ago. Folks are still dealing with the impact of that, of
Yeah.
being inside, of not having community and trying to figure out what community then might be redefined as. And so social cohesion becomes this like social prescription to just like come out and be outside with people, to meet new people in networks and spaces where you're not used to, and actually expand how you're thinking about your practice and gain inspiration from what just might be, one person that you met at a mixer, one night. And so that's really what I'm hoping is just like people feel inspired to innovate and create, and really in the atmosphere that we're in are not really getting bogged down to stop that work because we need it, because to our point here, it does contribute to how we are sustaining the humanities. So
Yeah. Danielle, you hit on something that several of us in the arts community and also the healthcare community in our region are talking about a lot, which is community as medicine.
yes.
Um, I want our participants in programs to walk away feeling as though they deserve access to the
Yes.
arts every
Yes.
single day of their life and that they need
Exactly.
it. Um, Obviously, experiencing art together is very different than experiencing it individually. We
Mm-hmm.
consume so much as a solo individual
Mm-hmm.
these days on our phones or our tablets or um, those kinds of delivery methods. But the experience of art and music and literature and theater together, it completely changes
Yep.
not only how we receive that art, but
Mm-hmm.
hopefully it changes us forever.
Yes.
I want people to be changed when they walk away from an
Mm-hmm.
experience in the arts,
Mm-hmm.
understanding something better, connected in a different and new way, healed, um, comforted, and nourished. And
Yes.
I think that's really what experiencing the arts as a collective, as a community, allows us to do.
I think you're right. As my bio said, my parents were artists, and my mother had was working on etchings. She went to Micah and was getting her
Mhm.
degree in prints, and she did a series of etchings of anguished women in Somalia who were had babies in their arms and they were screaming, and they were hard to look at. And she did this whole series of them, and I was like, why are you doing this? They're, no one is going to take, no one wants these. These are, you look at them and you go, and she says, I just had to do them because I just had
Yeah.
to do them.
Right.
I said, okay, and
Mhm.
then Save the Children bought them. And
Mhm.
they were all in the lobby in New York and Save the Children. I said,
Wow.
okay, I'm wrong.
Yeah. I get
Because
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
she said, I have to do these. And she didn't do them for any reason except she had to do them. And there
Yeah.
was something that she had to do. And then someone saw them and said, this is an emotion that people need to see.
Exactly.
They need to experience this. This is exactly what we want them to know about.
Exactly.
And so that's why that happened. And I'm
Mhm.
like, okay, that was a learning experience for me.
Mhm.
So, okay. That, all right.
Thank you, Victoria. I think Terry summarized like one of your comments because Terry mentioned in the chat, arts and humanities equal positive ripples in our communities. And I will
Yes.
add, based on your feedback and comments that you mentioned, art is also transformative. Art
Mhm.
is innovation, it's a learning experience, it's nourishment. I'm gonna open it up sometime for questions. So one of the questions actually I saw that let me go back. Tim actually mentioned, hi Tim.
Hi,
What kind of
Tim.
partnership would you like to explore with colleges and universities, given our own pragmatic or enrollment time and financial pressures? So I'm going to repeat the question. What kind of partnerships would you like to explore with colleges and universities, given our own pragmatic enrollment time and financial pressures? I think we will go with Monica, Daniela, then Victoria.
Thank you, Tim, for your question and for tuning in today. Um, my answer would be all kinds of partnerships. We really work hard here at Strathmore to make sure that when we enter a relationship with another organization or entity, that there's something in it for both parties, something that we couldn't achieve separately on our own, but together in collaboration, leveraging resources and expertise and um, time, we're able to get farther than we would by ourselves. And
Mhm.
one of the places that we're seeing some success in that with colleges and universities in particular is in providing experiential learning to accompany what's going on in the classroom. And that
Mhm.
may seem rather obvious, but for so many students, they go through their college career not ever interacting with the players, the communities, the creatives in the industry where they want to work until after they graduate, and then kind of have no idea how to navigate that. And
Right.
I think
Right.
we offer lots of ways to get a taste of um, what's possible and to explore that with less risk than when they're ready to exit that rather safe environment of
Mhm.
learning. And so we're doing a lot of that with various schools, um, and it's been very successful. I look forward to doing more of that.
I would say, from our perspective, also say, Monica, like all
Mhm.
the ways, a couple of different
Yeah,
ways.
yeah, all the way.
Particularly thinking about data and research from our side, as a nonprofit and like with limited staff dedicated to like our own things and responsibilities and roles. There's many times when we're looking to do, whether it's a listening session or really kind of dig into community engagement work, it's making sure that we have the data to address what we're seeing. And
Mhm.
so many universities that tap into those like GIS systems and things that are like doing those research in the School of Social Work or Public Policy or whatever, school that might be. Those are the students doing the work of really getting into the nitty gritty and more of kind of like the STEM part that's feeding the A of STEAM, right?
Mhm.
And that is more of the partnership that I would love to see with Create Baltimore, and then also, of course, just with various arts and cultural departments in our local universities. We were able, even just with Artscape, to work with Morgan State University and Penn State to create certain backdrops and like a stoop. Actually, this is the perfect example, a stoop at Artscape where people got to sit that looked like a Baltimore stoop. And it was a recreation of one that sat on the footprint. And that was that was tied into also then a storytelling component that we we're working with a local author, D. Watkins, during Artscape. And there was a sponsorship tied to him to the storytelling activation from a local healthcare sponsor that understood that we were prioritizing cultural storytelling at Artscape. And so he was able to do interviews and have photos and do all these things like on the stoop with people who were coming by to talk to him about their own experiences with the arts and culture and growing up in Baltimore. And that is incredibly important. But having the students involved in doing that, one, in these ways, again, that the humanities arts keeps the humanities fresh and relevant. And so as students are coming out and learning new things and have new technology and have new ways of and new behaviors of finding these things out and moving through their research and applying that research, it's working together to really understand our community better in a way that we might be limited with in our organization.
Having an intern or people with the colleges come to us, we are very small. And so it would take a dedicated volunteer to help work that, make them, give them hours and give them something to do. It also depends on what they were interested in. If they were interested in children, could they help us develop a children's program? Yes, they could. We could work with that. It would take a dedicated volunteer, someone else who has the time to do that. But we are developing people who can and are interested in doing that. As time goes on, we are developing a larger and larger volunteer base of our own. And right now, we're working with Girl Scouts who are working on their Gold Award and things like that. So could we have a volunteer come in and help with that? Yes. We do outreach projects. Could they help with the outreach projects? Could they help with some of the classes? Yes. So could they learn the skills that are involved? We have so many skills that are being taught in our classes. They could learn those skills and then maybe learn how to administrate some of the things that we do and administrate. It would be wonderful help. So yes.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much. We can still ask some questions. Tim said thank you. As I also saw, like Eliza pretty much mentioned Tim, if you want to connect, we always already have some collaboration in the chat, which is amazing. One of the questions we actually had wasn't related to this. It was related to us in terms of us having Chautauqua if we were bringing it back. I will say no because that's a program that we actually sunset, but we do have upcoming programs that we have done, such as like a conference that we're actually doing next month. So there's different ways that we're also engaging, and we are also connecting with the arts as well. Like next week, we will be actually having like a session, a path, a humanities path at the Maryland Arts Summit. So there's different ways that we are engaging, and also and we also have created also other programs, and so on. Since I don't see any other questions, so one thing I will actually ask y'all, I didn't get to ask, is the humanities ask us to think critically about power, identity, and will stories get told? How does that lens show up or get left out in the art sector today, or even the art sector today? So I'm curious to hear your insight. So we'll go with Daniela, then we'll have Monica, and then Victoria.
That's so interesting. I think we're in such an atmosphere. We are, I think, in a time where we are watching storytelling shift, or how we should be telling factual stories shift. But I think cultural storytelling is a huge, huge part of how we are should be making sure that identity is staying relevant and staying at the forefront of the arts. I think in trying to do it in a way, as we mentioned, in terms of social impact and prescription, it feels like if we're getting back to a place where identity and power aren't the things that are leading who you're showing up as, or rather the power part, and more on the identity, then that's how we're starting to also like look at creators, even as our narrative shifts in the organization, and being careful of not just saying like local artists, and saying Baltimore creators. Like there are ways that people's stories are being left out because they're not necessarily being included in the right um, audience or the right rooms, or however that's said. And it also leaves a lot of context out for the origins and the originators of like trends and things that come out. So like on the positive side, storytelling is wonderful. On the other side, I think sometimes there are trends or things that become popular, that the story that's getting told is about the person presently and not necessarily about the history of where that's coming from and the context of where that's coming from. And usually those origins and those histories start with oppressed groups and audiences who historically have just not had the platform to share their creativity and the platform to share their arts. And so as we watch those, even especially in the Black community, and there are ways that in how we style our hair, how we style our outfits, how we do furniture, all of these things, how we decorate our homes, that might seem like new inspiration now in 2026, but there's an origin to it, or there's a history to it that's missing. And that I feel like is often left out of the arts, where we're kind of forgetting a little bit of who came before us. So if there were ways to correct that, I think it's just trying to honor our history a little bit more and celebrate where things came from in a different light.
Thank you.
I actually think artists do a lot of this instinctually.
Mm-hmm.
It is who they are. Visual artists focus on the invisible, bringing it to our
Mm-hmm.
attention in many ways. Artists who are from marginalized communities decide to use their art for social change. There are protest songs, sculptures, graffiti, all of that has some grounding in power and identity and storytelling. And we have a program here called the Arts and Social Justice Fellowship Program for high school students. And they go through a 9-month program with facilitators about how to use whatever art or creative pursuit they employ, how to use that for social change. And I think the way that gets left out, power and identity and storytelling, is because a lot of that work is the hardest kind to produce and present.
Mm-hmm.
It isn't necessarily commercially viable at a box office, for instance.
Right.
It takes multiple drafts and workshops, and artists require support throughout the creative process. And it takes resources to do that,
Mm-hmm.
to stand alongside an artist while they're creating and then
Mm-hmm.
giving a platform, regardless of whether it makes it at the box office. And so often when institutions are financially challenged, that's the first kind of work to go.
Mm-hmm.
We focus on presenting the artist that we know is going to be a sellout,
Yep.
instead of the kind of art that is more personal
Yep.
and takes more. And so I think that that's where sometimes those really pivotal and meaningful stories don't emerge when
Mm-hmm.
organizations can't afford to take them on.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Monica. Victoria.
Mhm.
Um, I um I go to a lot of theater. We in Baltimore, and uh I feel like in many cases that the marginalized groups have, in many cases, taken over the theater, and maybe to their detriment sometimes, because while their stories need to be told and are important, they are not necessarily, if you look around at the audience, they're losing their audiences because they're telling it too loud, too strong, too often to an audience that it was is trying to support them, but it's on Friday night at 8 o'clock. Maybe they don't want to hear it again and again and again. So they'd like to laugh and be entertained rather than hear about all the wrong things in the world, um, for just a short period of time. Um, and um, so sometimes I think the left leaning part of art is
I
kind
agree,
of shooting
Lindsay.
themselves in the foot a little bit when they want to, and maybe that's not a popular thing to say right now, but I'm like, you need to look around at your audience and see who's in the theater. Um, and the I'm talking about the creative directors when they're, and I'm thinking center stage and what's happened there, because we've been going there for almost 20 years, and they used to have 25,000 subscribers and they don't now, and it's because they've changed what they're showing. And I'm not saying that they're and I might be wrong. And I'm not saying that the change wasn't good, but I'm thinking it was too strong, too fast. And people said, wait a minute. Um, I just need, I just need, I don't need to be beat over the head with this. So um, I think their messages were good, and there's some really good things, and there are absolutely phenomenal actors there. And some of them are actually some of my relatives. So I was, it's a hard thing. It's a hard line to walk. And I'm still supporting them, but I'm like, I'm worried about them. Do you know what I'm
Well,
talking
I
about?
think to push back on that gently, Victoria, before we leave, and I agree with Eliza and Lindsay in the comment section, it would be very difficult to then strip the human experience away from creators to keep adjusting to changing audiences, right? So
Right.
audiences have the choice to be able to purchase tickets. They have the choice to read the descriptions and understand kind of what they're about to see. And the people who are creating the art and who are being vulnerable enough to put themselves on stage to tell stories that feel very personal to them have less choice in how the story is told because that's just how their story has unfolded. So to keep changing how they do that based on the audience or investment, we're going to keep going through that as a society. There's going to be ebbs and flows in how arts and culture is funded and invested in. And if we use that as a sign to change the integrity of the work, I think that that comes at a bit of a consequence, and that's not necessarily how Baltimore, especially, would like their arts and culture industry to move.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm just noticing if I'm just noticing the change, and I'm wondering why the change, looking at the change and why it's happened, and the change in artistic directors, and the change in the theater and what's being shown, and the changes in the packed audiences and then the small audiences, and looking at around who's there, because I go to Everyman, and I go to, I go to a lot of theater, and I'm looking at what Shakespeare theater, I'm going to what's being shown, and I love the theater, and I love what's being done, and the new playwrights, and but I'm I'm looking at how things are evolving. I'm trying to pay attention, and I'm curious about it, and I'm
Mhm.
trying to figure out what's going on. That's all.
Yeah, our
Yeah.
audiences have to evolve with our artists, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and I would think to add to what we mentioned, I think it's kind of like similar to kind of like some of the comments, because I think art is transformative, art is innovation, and art is nourishment. And I think part of the transformation of art is centering voices that sometimes have not been centered before historically, and that has been marginalized. And I think that comes with being confronting new realities that sometimes that can make people uncomfortable. And I think
It
this is
should.
pretty much what I'm seeing from your reaction, Victoria,
Yeah.
that
Mhm.
is different. And because of that, some people may not react to it, they may not show up, but at the same time, there are people that's gonna show up and there are new
Right.
audiences that's gonna come to it.
Right,
Exactly.
right.
And that have not seen, and I think to what Monica has mentioned, that arts, they deserve to have access to the arts. They
Oh,
deserve to see the arts and deserve to have access to the arts. And I think that's one of the things that the arts is actually, that's part of the conversation that artists actually bring and that creative directors try to bring to push societies forward, but also to have those particular difficult conversation. And these are the space for those sites of transformation that the arts actually does. On that end, I know it's one. Thank you all, everybody, for joining. If you like today's conversation, and please join us next week at the Maryland Art Summit, where we're actually gonna do explore the arts and humanities as well. What is the connection between the arts and humanities? We'll be there on June 16 at Prince George's Community College. And if you really enjoyed the conversation, join us at our next webinar on the Bringing Humanities to Life, which will be in July 8th, I believe. And also subscribe to our newsletter to learn more about our upcoming programming and in other events that we're going to be part of. And also on that note, I want to thank our panelists for joining us today. I want to thank Monica for being part of the conversation. I want to thank Daniela, and I also want to thank Victoria. And thank you everyone for joining in. And please follow them. And like I said, these are the kind of conversation we want to have.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
everyone.
thank you.
Yes. Thank you,
Thank you. Nice
everyone.
meeting you.
Nice
Nice to
meeting
meet you all.
I mean,
Bye bye.
Bye.